Hello, everybody. Welcome back to BLS020 Show and Tell with CHAU TRAN. Ciao, nice to have you back. Good to have you here. Your mic is on mute, man.
Oh, nice to be back.
Awesome, awesome. So yeah, Ciao doesn't need an introduction as he's one of the residents of the channel, so we can dive right into it. Today is going to be all about component store playground, component store testing, and we will be doing the tests in this component play store playground that Ciao and I have been working on. So yeah, we're already watching your screen. I think we can go ahead and talk a little bit about the thing we're going to test, how to test it, and then let's dive right into it. And the second part is going to be me adding extra tests and Ciao guiding me along the way. So it's going to be a dual show and tell.
Yep.
Awesome.
All right. So So before we start, just want to remind everyone, because if you're familiar with BLS, then you probably know of this component store playground. But I just want to remind everyone that we're on the workflows of the component store playground, and here you have the list component or the list route where we show all the workflows that we have in the data store. You can add new one. You can add new workflow, or you can click on one workflow and then you can start working on your workflow. And to remind again, the workflow is a recursive tree structure with groups and conditions. You can add condition, you can add groups to each. You can add condition to each group, and you can add more groups, nested group, up into the max depth that you set on the workflow. And in each of the condition, there's a form control to control this checkbox. If you check this checkbox, you can delete the condition. If you not, then the delete icon will not be shown. You can delete the group. If you delete a group with children, then you will see this alert. If not, then if it doesn't have any children like this one, we can just delete it straight away. Of course, we can delete this one. And of course, we can save this. And if we go back to the workflows, we go back to test. Is that a test one?
I think it's the last one you opened. Not sure.
Another. All right. I guess then save is broken, but we can fix that. But yeah, you get the gist that we're going to test the list, and we're going to test the details of the workflow of each group, each condition. So we have 4 component stores here. One is for the list, so that's the workflow list store. We have the detail store, so that the workflow detail store. We have each group will have its own store, so that workflow group store, and the condition will have its own store. That is the workflow condition store. And we're going to start with the workflow list.
Yeah, so this component store is basically separated from the other ones. It doesn't get inherited or anything. This is basically powering this component, listing out whatever workflows we have in the database, and allowing you to add new ones and delete them, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, awesome.
So a little bit different than the last one. I mean, than the last time we showed component store playground is now we're in the NX workspace.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It's NX right now, and so we Ciao migrated the app to NX, which was the Christmas present, and yeah. So we're going to test this using NX. So the one way to do it, which is what I would probably do, is run in a terminal NX test, and then the name of the library, for instance, workflow feature, which would test everything in the workflow feature.
Okay.
But you showed there's another way you can do this from within WebStorm.
Yep. So here's the test file. We're gonna go over the store first, and then we're gonna show the test file. So in the test file, if you open WebStorm and you have set up Jest, and because NX uses Jest by default, so it will have Jest set up automatically everything for you. If you open up the project with WebStorm, then WebStorm will pick up a spec file, and it will show these icons on the gutter for you. If you click on, you can run the whole test, or you can click on each individual test and you run that test individually. So let's say if I work on this test specifically and I work on it until I get the test right, and I can just run that specific test without running the whole suite. So I'm going to run this test real quick. So right now I'm run the whole test. So it's going to test, run, and it's going to pass, and it'll show me what test is run. If you click on it, then the editor will jump to that line of code. So I click on the workflow list store, it will jump to the workflow list store. If I click on the initialize, it will jump to the initialize. And you can expand to each individual test that is jumped to in the editor. And I like testing using WebStorm when I work on my test.
Yeah, I can imagine it has a very quick feedback loop this way.
Yep. And you can actually debug it. So let's say right here, we're going to go over all the details of this. But at this point, to say that I'm testing a stream unobservable. So I can just put a breakpoint right here and hit debug. And WebStorm we do things. We stop at my breakpoint, and I can do Command Shift A and do evaluate expression, and do observer spy dot get values. Get values. So now I can see what's in there without doing console log, and I can just like traverse all the object, all the items, or the data in that object before I test things. So that's very nice.
Awesome. Yeah, this is super. And this is something I definitely need to get accustomed to because I don't use it. Before moving on, I want to quickly say hi to everybody that's on the stream. Delis Dominguez, my wife. Hello, everybody. And specifically, hello, Chau. She's getting fan of you, seeing your stuff. We have Abel de la Fuente. Hey there, Abel. Nice to see you back. And Ryan Hutchinson. Hey, man. Good to see you all here on this BLS020. So cool. And so we're going to test the workflow list store first. So what it does is it takes in a list from the database.
Yep. So we're gonna go. We're gonna go from the component, and then we're gonna go to the list store, and then we go to the test of the store.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So first thing up is the component that we're going to test unit test for. I assume that's going to be fairly straightforward. Looking at the component, we have a very small component body.
Yep.
I think most of the tests that you will do will actually test this these methods, right? It won't test any template stuff.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the component. You can see that we have the list store here provided in the component level. Expose the VM from the store. Just inject the store. And on the net, we say load workflows effect, so that we load the workflows from our data service.
Yeah.
Then add workflow, just call the add workflow effect, and delete workflow, and just call the delete workflow effect. And that's exactly what we're going to test.
Okay, so if I paid attention well to Joe Eames' classes about unit testing Angular, what I need to do here is set up a mock for Worklist store. I need to add the load workflows effect, add workflow effect, and delete workflow effect, and make sure they get triggered.
Correct.
When I get these answers.
Correct. That is correct. And I'm going to show the workflow list component spec file. And here I'm using ngNeat Spectator. And if you're not familiar with ngNeat, then we have like a bunch of cool libraries with Angular, for Angular, and one of them is the Spectator. Spectator is a test, like you can think of it like a test library that provides extra feature on top of like the current testing framework that Angular has. And it's very, very straightforward, very powerful, has support for both Jasmine and Jest.
Very cool. Yeah.
And it also has a shallow testing, meaning that on my component right here, I'm using playground page, which is a component. I'm using playground loading, which is another component. That is being exposed by this shell UI loading module right here. I don't have to provide that when I use ngNeat Spectator to test my component. I just shallow test this template without having to load in these modules.
Okay, so it basically ignores the fact that we have external components and it just doesn't take them into account.
Yep.
Interesting.
Because now you can focus like solely on that template. It will still render the template, but it will not go into these components and render these components template. It will still render this H3 right here because this is just H3.
Yeah, so the ng content will propagate up. It will be displayed. The fact that we have ng content in playground page, for instance,
Yeah,
that means
yeah.
that so it will still work.
It will still work.
Yeah, but everything that gets rendered out by the playground page itself doesn't get rendered into the output.
Correct.
Very cool. Okay.
Correct.
Shallow tests.
Yep, it's shallow test. It's called shallow test because the fact that you only want to unit test this component.
Yeah.
But because of Angular, you have to provide all the stuff that this component needs, even for the test to run.
Yeah, I think on in regular Angular testing, they say you can use no error schema to get a similar behavior, right?
Yep, that is correct.
Awesome, so cool. So we're gonna do spectator to test this component and basically mock these methods and make sure that they work.
Yep. All right. So the first thing first is to declare a variable called spectator. You can call it whatever you want, but from the documentation of spectator, they call it spectator, and it is a type of spectator of your component. Excuse me. And by default, it will import from just nginit/spectator. But if you're using jest, then you want to import it from jest.
Perfect. Yeah.
Give me 1 second. I'm gonna turn up my light. We'll be right back.
Okay. Yeah. No worries. No worries at all. And I'm gonna switch around a little bit the screen here so we have some more screen real estate. Gonna move us down. Yep. That already looks more like light.
Yep. It's getting dark here. It's getting snowing here.
Oh.
Yeah.
And here the summer is starting.
All right, so that's
awesome.
We're gonna if you work with jest, you want to import from jest.
Yep.
Next, we're gonna declare a store variable. You can call this mock store if you want to. Mock store. I just call it store, and this is going to be the mock of the workflow list store.
Yeah, so we do provide in the type, but it will not get instantiated, and we can provide any of the methods there.
And and the spy object is from spectator as well.
Very cool.
Next one, instead of like the Angular testing framework, we use like testing testbed dot I think like what module or something, I forgot. But with nginit spectator, you're going to use a create component factory.
Right.
And you can call this whatever you want. I call it create component because the documentations of spectator says create component. This will return a function. That's why it's a factory. So for this factory, you can pass in just the component. So workflow list component. You can just pass in that, or you can pass in more options. So with the option, you can specify the component. So I specify my component. I import the testing, the router testing module. I didn't try shallow without a router testing module because I put in shallow after I have all of my imports, but I left the router testing module here.
Right. So this is something we can check when I go do the to-do list.
Yep. In terms of mocks or in terms of dependency injection for this component, they have two different types of arrays. One is mocks and another one is providers. These two are the same thing, but with the mocks, you can just pass in the type of the service, just like this one, like the token, the injection token. Then nginit spectator will try to mock everything in this service for you. It will mock every single method for you.
Interesting.
If you want to, you can use providers and use a function called mock provider, and you can just do workflow service. These two lines are equivalent, completely equivalent. But with the mock provider, you can do things whatever you want. You can customize the mock behavior.
Right.
So that's the mocks and providers. And whatever you do, just keep it consistent across your application. So for workflow service, I don't have anything that I want to customize from the mocks. So I just use the mocks array.
Yeah.
For providers, there's component providers and there's providers. So providers are those that are singleton or provided in root. or provide it at the module level. But if you have something you want to provide at the component level, you're going to have to use the component providers.
Okay.
I ran into this issue where I was trying to use the providers, but then I could not test anything on here. Like nothing gets called. So it tells me that I don't have the same instance here.
Yeah.
So that's, yep.
Yep, it's wiring it up to a different version of your workflow
correct.
store.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is basically this method here, this create component factory method, is the alternative of testbed that configure testing module.
Right.
With a more concise syntax and some more smart parameters, as it seems.
Yep. And in
Awesome.
here, you use the mock provider with the workflow list store as the type, and then we're gonna mock the properties. You can see here it says this is an object or dictionary of properties, because all of the methods will be marked automatically for you.
Yeah.
But because of the way the component store is written, like this.effect or this.updater, those are actually functions, right? But they are properties. They call
function to a property.
Yeah, they're callable properties. So those are not being auto-marked for you. So you have to mark them right here. This is what I've used to mark those. And I just assign a jest.function. And this is how you mark a function with jest.
And so I'm kind of interested. So this is something we talked about on chat, or you showed me that this works this way. It doesn't auto-mock these methods. Do you think this is something that could be added to NgNeet Spectator, or is this something that's just like it's not gonna work?
I don't know. I don't know if like Spectator can go through the list of the properties of this class and like figure out if it's a callable property or not.
Yeah,
they might, or if it's just like a JavaScript limitation, then I guess. Yeah,
we have to live with it. Okay, but yeah, then again, this is something you would do for a lot of mocking solutions anyway. Basically, write out whatever you're going to mock. So I don't think we're losing a whole lot here.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So now
and then we're going to have to mock the VM as well, and the VM is a stream, and we're going to return a stream with off from RxJS.
Yep. So now it's just a static object, and we don't need to do any interaction with this.
And then this is shallow. So we pass in shallow true, default to false. So you pass in true for shallow, and it make this component is shallow testing component.
Very cool.
And then in before each, instead of calling, I guess, a create component or compile component or whatever with a test bed, we're going to just call spectator and assign the create component return from the create component to that spectator right here.
Yeah, so this would be actually like fixture equals testbed.create component.
Yep.
But this is the alternative. So wherever we see fixture, spectator, we might think, okay, this is what the fixture is in like classic Angular tests.
Yep. And when you create a component, you can actually pass in the inputs of this component. Cool. So you can pass in the input for this component, or you can like override the providers that you set up here, which I never run into a situation where I have to. Or you can say if it's detect change or not. By default, when you say create component, it will run detect changes for you. That is ng on the init. All right. So for this one, we're not going to pass in anything. And then the store is going to call the inject method on the spectator. The spectator will have the inject method. Spectator will have the component itself, and we'll have a couple of helper method to query for the template, or to click, or basically to interact with the template. And then it will have a method called inject. This is to grab the inject, like testbed.inject, basically that.
Yeah.
So you can inject, get the instance of the dependency injection. And here we're going to get the instance of the workflow list store, and we want it from the component injector.
Yeah, so store gives us the same instance we would have. So then saying this.store what is it, load workflows effect.
Store load workflow effect would be that.
Yeah, okay, so we now get a handle, and this is actually, so if you can leave this line for 1 second there. the one you had. So this store.load workflows effect, this is the API of our workflow store, but actually it's the function that we mocked on line 20 here.
Correct. So if you don't have this line right here, right, I'm going to comment it out. It will still have that right here. But if you want to do like expect to have been called or something like that, like this store.to have been called, it will fail.
Yeah, because it's not a method, so it's never called.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. And I think it might be if you can quickly click into the workflow list store and look at how we defined the load workflows effect there. So for those, because we know the mental map, but what we want to say, so line 37 here, we have load workflows effect is not a function, it's a property that we assign to this dot effect, and this will make it callable, if you will. So we can invoke it. We can say this dot workflows, load workflows effect with parentheses, and this will trigger the method, but it's not assigned as a property, as a class property, as we know them. Perfect. Yeah. Okay, cool. So I think for now we have a lot of context on how everything is set up, how it's all wired up. Looks like Spectator is a nice cleanup from testing from testbed.
Yep.
And then we can go ahead and test the actual component.
Yeah. So the first thing first is I want to test when this component is initialized. So when this component is initialized, a couple of things happen. First thing is I assign the VM on the store to the VM on the component. And then I want to assert that this function gets called. So that is in my test. I say, hey, should created. Okay, I want my component to be created from my settings up here. So I test that the component is truthy, and then I want to test if this VM on the component is the same instance. Here I use to be is the test like the same instance of the VM on the store.
Yeah.
So this is I test when I create the component. And then here I say, hey, I should call store.load workflows effect on init. So I just test that if load workflows effect to have been called.
Yeah, which means if we initialize a new instance of this component, we want to make sure that $VM$ is assigned to the one in the store, and we want to make sure that store.load workflows effect has been called without us doing any interaction. So this is basically the initial state.
Yep.
Cool. And let's just for fun run it and make sure that it executes.
Yep. We can run the whole initialize, or we can run both. Each of these. I'm going to run the whole initialize.
Yeah. And this does it.
Test.
Okay. Cool. So this all works as expected. Yeah. Nothing very shocking here.
Next one is I want to say, hey, should call add workflow effect on the store on add workflow. So here I just call the function. Here this is something that I've been debating. Like, should I like query for like the button right here? Like I can't actually right here. Should I query for this input? Type in something for this input, and then hit enter, because Spectator allows you to do all of that. So if you can do Spectator.query, you can query by like the input, right? After that, you can do, I guess, .type. Actually, you can do Spectator.type, type in element. You can type in that input, and then Spectator.enter. There's like trigger.
You can send a
we can send like DOM event, and instead of like calling add workflow on the component directly. Like I've been debating this, but because we're gonna have Cypress, so I'm gonna just call the add workflow on the component without going through the template.
I think from what I've picked up on other tutorials doing testing, that these are considered two levels of deepness, if you will. So this is a more shallow test than the other one, where you also go into the component. Yeah, I think most of the projects where I worked on with proper testing, these kind of things happened in the end-to-end tests, where
yep, that is correct. That's what I thought.
Yeah, but it's nice to know that you might, because some things might not need a Cypress setup for these kind of things.
Yep, and yes, you can do that.
Very cool.
And I just want to quickly show that. So when we use ng-meet, spectator, you have some custom matchers. So let's say I want to test for the button, and I want to test if this button to have text. Like these are custom matcher from spectator.
Very cool.
Yep.
Very cool. Okay, awesome. So, okay, we test the first method. Well, second is basically the same. We say, hey, I want this to be happen. I think we can also say to have been called and then check if we have the right parameters. But that's basically testing the framework.
Yeah. Right here, I don't test. We can, but for this piece, I don't want to test like the random ID.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm sorry, the random ID here, because now like the random ID we cannot get from here without mocking the random ID.
Yeah. No, and I think it's
debatable. Go ahead.
It's debatable if it should live here. I think if from looking at it at this angle, it should live in the service.
Correct.
Where we create the workflows, and this should do the initial setup. This shouldn't live here.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why I cannot do to have been called with.
Right here. Okay, cool. Yeah. I get that. Yeah, perfect.
So right here, because we pass in the input element, I can do a quick query to put in the input, but then I have to test like the type and everything. So I just put in the object with the value property, and I assert that as HTML input element.
Yeah.
So whatever you do, you're gonna have to pass in an object with the value property, and this method will use that value property, and that's pretty much it.
Very cool.
So then I just expect that at workflow effect has been called, and we can run that real quick. So
awesome.
passed.
Yeah, works as expected as well. And then the last one, delete workflow. I think it's very similar, right?
Yep, it's very straightforward. Just grab the workflow, make some mock data, and here we pass in the mouse event to stop propagation.
Right.
Right, because if we don't pass this in, then we're gonna go to the details page. So
actually,
spectator, go ahead.
No, actually, most of my apps I put the stop propagation in the template. I'm not sure why I didn't do it here, but I basically handle stop propagation directly where I click it.
So let me go here. So you can do it after or before?
I do it before generally.
So you can do event stop propagation here.
Yeah, and that's it. Get rid of event there.
Awesome. So I'm going to change that actually. Just do that.
This one. Yeah, that's. I think I like this because you don't have to pass along event, and it's more clear at the moment when you look at the button. You see, okay, this doesn't propagate up.
That is correct. And now I'm going to have to change this one, so I don't need that create mouse event anymore.
Yeah.
Just quickly, create mouse event is a method from Spectator that allow you to create a DOM event. So it would have create keyboard event for you. So you can do whatever you want with the DOM event from Spectator.
Very cool. So it was nice that it was there so we could touch on this, but we don't really need it in this app because we don't really do anything with this.
Yep.
But, yeah, pretty cool, pretty cool.
Yep, so this one, just say, hey, I want to call the delete workflow with this workflow, and then I want to just assert that this effect has been called with the workflow passed in.
Perfect, yeah.
And now we can absolutely test it, and it should pass.
Should still pass. Yeah, let's hope it does. It does. Yay, nice.
Yep.
Extra point for CHAU.
So that's the component. Very, very simple. You only have to test if your store has been called, methods has been called or not.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. So this is, I think, pretty straightforward, and this is something I could do. There's no reason I don't do this in terms of knowledge-wise. This seems like a total clear example. Yeah, so this is one of the reasons why we built this component store, to have some nice real-life examples of real-life apps and do it in a proper way. We're still kind of discovering what is the proper way, but
yep.
From a testing point of view, I really like how simple this test from the component is. So now let's look at the second part.
Let the store, right?
Yeah, the store.
So for the store, let's quickly look over the store first. So the store will have the service injected. So we're going to mark this service first. We're going to test because we call supply here. So our VMs will have some initial data. So we're going to have test on initialize. Then our VM will emit some default data.
Yeah.
So that's and throughout our store, the one thing that we expose to the component is the VM. So we're gonna keep asserting the VM change accordingly to the effect and the updater here in the store. So that's my strategy of testing component store.
So to recap, basically we're going to subscribe to the VM, trigger actions, and make sure that the VM responds in the way we expect it to respond.
Correct.
Yeah. And then again here, because on line 15, we see that we injected the workflow service, but we're not going to write to the database in real life. We're just going to mock these ones and make sure that the operations get called.
Right.
Perfect.
So we're gonna test all of these. We're gonna test update workflows. We're gonna test load workflows effect. We're gonna test add workflow effect, and we're gonna test the delete workflow effect. We're not gonna test the reload because it's private.
Okay. Yep.
And if you notice in the component, we don't test the VM or we don't test the data that this list component is getting from the store at all, because we assert that it has the same instance of the VM on the store, and we're going to test the data of the VM on the store test. So we're not going to worry about what this component is going to receive, because we know that it's going to receive the right data from the store.
Yeah, considering that the store will be tested separately.
Yep.
That's a great call.
All right, so now let's jump in these tests. All right, first of all, again, spectator. And this time it's going to be a spectator service instead of spectator. And spectator service is imported from spectator/jest. For the VM, because we're going to use the VM throughout the test, so we're going to make a global one for the test, which is VM. And the type, I can't just put the type on the VM, but I'm too lazy, so I'm use this.
Very good. Yeah.
All right. I have a helper function called getVM, and this getVM will return some default value for me first. So the default value here is based on I look at the store and I look at when my workflow my store is initialized and what default value my VM might have. Yeah. So I have that right here, and then I expect a partial. So from my test, I can pass in any partial object of the VM to update it.
Very nice.
This is helper method right here. We can actually just rip it out into a global helper function, but I'm too lazy again.
But I think also, for instance, what we could do in the store is have an initial values object and export that and use that in the test. I think that's something I would probably prefer.
Yeah, we can do that too. Actually. But the thing is, the initial state of the store might not be your initial VM.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's a great point. So cool. Okay, so here's some basic setup, and
again,
we can create our service.
Yep. So same concept with the component test. You're going to have create service factory that returns a callable method, and I call that create service, right? And in create service factory, you can pass in just the service, or you can pass in an option. And now this option, instead of component, you will have service, and you're going to pass in the type of the service you want to test for. If you think about it, this store is just an injectable, right? So it's a service. Yeah. And then I use the mocks here to mocks my workflow service.
Yep. So this looks very similar.
Yep. Before each, you're going to just call that create service, get the spectator, and the VM will be on the service of the spectator. So on the spectator, you will have inject, and you will have the service. And you can grab the VM from it.
Very cool. Seems straightforward enough and similar enough. I like how these APIs are pretty similar. between the two.
Right. Yeah, it takes me no time to get used to or to jump from create component factory to create service factory at all. Like no time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine how that works.
Yep. So for describe, I have initialize describe, and then here I want to assert my service is created correctly. So I just assert that service is truthy. I also assert that my VM is truthy. And that's the most two important things for a store, that the service is there and the VM is there.
Yeah.
Right. And this is where I assert my VM emit default value. If I don't have any super here, then I will not test that. Because I have super called here, and then we both know that if even if it's just like partial state, it will emit everything.
Yeah. It will, and then it will emit like null values. But yeah. So this is again initialization, and make sure that things happen without us interacting with this class.
Yep. Now the first thing is I'm using another library, and this library is called Observer Spy. And Observer Spy is a helper library to help test observable.
Very cool.
Super simple to test observable. And it might have more API, but this is the only API I use to test everything in this application as of this moment.
Very cool. Yep.
All right. So the first thing first, you're going to create a spy of your observer. So you just say, hey, at this point, at this moment, I want to subscribe to my VM. That's the first thing we want to do. You can, however, you can put this all the way up here, or up here, if you want to. But then I just want to put it here because I might have, at some point, I might have this one at a different point in time. Like this one right here, I have it in the middle of the test after I have all of my setup thing.
Yeah.
All right. So this one, at this point, I say, hey, subscribe to my VM, and then I will expect the values of this observable will be equal to an array because it values. So it's going to be, if you emit 1, 2, 3, 4 values, this is going to be an array of 1, 2, 3, 4 items.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So if we run this one, it will initiate service, and it will mock out our store, our VM, and it will verify that it's the same as our
default
VM.
Yep. Yeah. And we can run it right there. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And we can debug it. I want to show you quickly a debug of this observer spy and what is on it.
Yeah. So okay, now we hit the debug, and we're in there, and we say we're going to evaluate the expression. So give us the result of whatever expression we put in here.
Yep. Now we can evaluate the observer spy, and we can try to look for what we want to assert. Like most people just say, hey, I want to just want to assert that at this point my observable has emitted 3 times. So you can do get values length, and you can assert that length. Or you can just say, hey, at this point, what is the last value of this observable? Then you can do get last value. Or me, I use get value. So I want to know what is all the value that this observable has been emitted since I subscribe to it.
Yeah.
Or you can just say, I just want to know if it's observable emitted. Then you can just do this. And you assert if it's true or false.
Yeah.
You can also do error, or you can also get error. They will get the error for you.
Yeah, and this should return null or undefined.
Yep. So yeah, it should be undefined.
Get
or
error.
Yeah.
Undefined. Yeah. Okay. So and this basically I didn't know this, and this seems like a super nice way, because what I see here with this expression is something you can use directly inside your expect, and you can basically use this little evaluate window to create your expressions that you're going to use inside the expect. So this is definitely a powerful tool. I think your audio is offline again. Yeah, that seems better.
So now my get values will return an array, and that array will only have one value, which is my initial VM. So this is what I'm asserting.
Yeah.
And we checked that is passed earlier. So that's my initialize. That's my initialize of the store. Just the service has been created, and the VM is truthy, and the VM emit default value.
Yep.
Next one is we're going to test all the effects in here. The first thing first is here's where I create my service spy. You can put it out here if you want to, but I just put it here because this is what my effects interact with the service.
Yep. So you have one describe block where you do the effects, and then another one for the updaters, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So get marked items. This is a helper function that takes in the data. It takes in the previous data. So what is currently in my VM, so I can use that. And this will return an observable of 2 items. One is loading and one is success. And this is to mark out the behavior of the 2 API response operator that I have.
Very
so
cool.
That's the get marked items. And before each, I'm going to get the service from the spectator.inject. Right. And then the first thing is I say, hey, low workflows effect, what should happen? When a low workflows effect is called, I want to call the service.items. This is to get all the items properly. And I subscribe to my VM here, right? I subscribe to my VM here. And then I say, hey, the service.items, I want to mark your return value to the get marked items.
Yeah. So this will be 2 emissions,
So,
2 values get emitted.
Yep. So this items will return me this observable, basically that.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to call my workflows effect. And then I'm going to assert that my service.items is called with an empty array. Why so? If you look into the low workflows effect, before I call the service.items, I grab the data I have in my workflows. I grab the data and I pass the data inside of the items as my previous data. So if we look back into, my component store, right? Let me delete everything in here. And we're going to do that. You can see that it's show the loading, like briefly right there. And if the loading is based on this is loading and the data.length. If I don't pass in the previous data, my previous data, my data that the items return with the 2 API response will always be empty. So let's say if I don't have that and I add new thing, it would show that loading again because it doesn't know that I have previous data. So here I have to pass in the previous data with the latest form, and I pass that previous data inside of the items. So here, because I know my VM, currently my workflows is an empty array right here. So I know that it will get called with an empty array.
Right.
So this is what I assert. And after that, I will expect my last value of the VM will be the workflows of empty array again, because that is what I pass in for this one. I pass in an empty array for this one to return my data. Yeah. So I know my workflows will be empty, but is empty will not be true. Yeah. The reason why is my initial value is status of idle, and the loading state or the is empty state check the status to be success. So my initial value will be is empty false. But because now I called the low workflows effect already, so my service items return something, and the service items return status success. So I know now my VM is empty is true because of that status success, and the data is an empty array.
This is awesome because so from what I understand, what you're doing is actually testing the behavior with.
Hey B, one second B.
Yeah.
I hear you all robotic. So give me one second. Really? I'm gonna grab a new pair of earphones.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So while CHAU is on the way, let's quickly recap. I think what we've been looking at is doing this store and testing it. And what it seems, and this is what I'm going to confirm, is that we test the public API. So as well as the service methods that we call load workflow effect as the public API. And we tested the view model. So we don't test any of the internals. Why it shows that is empty is true, but we do show that it does this. Okay, looks like CHAU is back.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Hey man. Yep. Does this work better?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. I think what I just talked about briefly is that from what I see, we really only test the public API, so calling a method that we call from the outside on line 75, load workflows effect. What we actually verify is that on line 78, that makes sure that is empty is true, but why this is empty is set to true, this is not of the concern we test. We don't really interested in this. We're just interested in the behavior.
Yep. We know for a fact that if we get the data, if we get an empty array, and we get the status of success, then we know that is empty is true.
So let's do a quick test and let's run the test on line 71. Yep, this one, and then so we're gonna run this, and this will be green. Then if we change status on 61 to be so line 61, you can do it this way. Yeah, or line 61 just change a different status. Yeah, let's set it to loading
change it to
error or idle. I think idle might be a one that's
all right.
Failing is what
it should fail.
Because now it cannot say that the store is empty is true because it never got to a successful loading state. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So
this
is so this is just to make sure that we're on the same page here. We don't test the internals of the behavior. We don't test how it works. We make sure that it does how we expect it to behave.
Yep.
Very cool. Very cool. So let's we can move that one back. And so this is the first part of our view model. It's the initial state. And then the second one.
Yep. So for the second part, and this is still in the low workflows effect. For the second one, now I will assert that it will be called with the previous workflows. So this one I test with a previous workflow of an empty array because I know my current VM has an empty workflows.
Yeah.
But then this one I will test that it actually has data. So here I create a previous data, a mock previous data, and it's going to be a workflow array, and it just has an ID, name, and some group.
Yeah.
And then I call the patch state directly on the store, and I know I don't have to test the patch state because it has been tested with the component. So hopefully,
knowing Alex, it has been tested.
Yeah. So I just call it. I know for a fact that if I call patch state and I pass in my data, that the workflows will be updated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then after that, I will start marking my service items to, hey, now a marked item, please return me a new data with the previous data. So here I'm lazy. I'm being lazy here. I use previous data for both.
Yeah.
So this one and this one at this time is the same. So I'm being lazy.
So we actually trigger the update behavior, but it's not actually updating it because it's not really relevant.
Yep. So right here, this is where I subscribe to my VM at this point. Whatever you do, you might want to subscribe to the VM before you act, right? So this is like an act.
Yeah.
This is what they call like assert. Right?
Yeah. And then the first one is
mark or setup. I don't remember. This is one mark or setup.
Yeah.
So I subscribe to my VM, and then I call my load workflow effect, and now it should assert the items to be called with the previous data. And I will also assert my get last value to have that previous data, because that's what this returned. If I actually just do this, it should fail. But let's do that after this. So we're gonna try running this real quick.
And actually, I just quickly looked it up. The first one, they call it arrange. So it's arrange, act, assert.
Arrange.
That's the three steps in the testing. Just looked it up.
Arrange. Yep. Right. So I just ran the test and it passed.
Yeah.
But now let's say that my my items will return an empty array.
Right?
Yeah. So now if I run it, it should fail. There we go. It should fail because now my is empty should be true because it returns an empty array. But then my workflow should be an empty array.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah.
So again, be lazy. So there we go. So that's the should call service.items with previous workflow, and you start seeing the pattern here. You just, as you say, we test the public API. We don't really test the internal implementation of the store.
Yeah, we don't really care. And this is nice because at some point, if we decide to have a different way on how to calculate is empty, we don't have to update our tests. We can just make sure. Basically, our test then will serve as a guide to make sure that it still works the same way.
Yep.
In all the cases that we think it will. Yeah. Awesome.
Nice.
So, and then I think the rest of it more or less is the same stuff, right? But
it is the same stuff. It's the same stuff.
So cool. So and this was supposed to be the simple one. I like that we were like, oh, this is simple, and we're already like 50 minutes in chatting about this.
This is a simple one.
So cool. I'm here all day. I don't do anything else.
Me too.
So we can continue a little bit.
We can continue a little bit into the detail store, and then we will jump over to you, and you're gonna go with the to-do store.
Yeah. Okay. So to wrap this up, we test the component itself by checking if the component component method gets triggered, and the component gets set up the way we expect, and we assume that the workflow list store is tested. Because of line 35 here, we assume it's the same one. We assert this.
Yep.
So then we go into the workflow list store, and there what we test is actually like the methods we call on them and the effect it has on the state on the
on the VM
view model. Yeah. And that's basically it. Seems straightforward enough. And we don't use any testbed provided by Angular /course/testing, but we do use Spectator from ngNeat to give us some helper methods, some factory methods that create instances for us.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And I think what might be interesting to look at the detail store, like where do we deviate from this thing? So where is it no longer straightforward compared to what we have?
Yep. So for the details, the component is the same. Again, it's going to just inject the detail store and assert that is called like the method on the detail store. Yeah. I'm gonna jump into the detail store a little bit because detail store has a lot of things happening, and we also have some helper as static method. And we have a lot of things going on in this detail store, and let's just quickly look over the store.
Yeah. So
the store is where we store like our tree in a normalized fashion. We have a state here. I'm going to go over really quickly. We have a state here, and we have all of our state selector, and we have the VM here. We're going to test the VM with that will emit the right data.
Yeah.
We have the service injected, we have the routes injected, and this is what somewhat tricky to test because of the initialize effect right here.
Right.
That we call in the constructor. And we're going to test every effect in here and every updater in here with the workflow effect.
Yeah. Okay. So this one is also responsible. So what we do in a high level here in this workflow details store, we basically tap into the workflow ID parameter in the router, and we have this trigger the rest of the whole store. So based on whatever on line 94 gets triggered, that executes the methods on line 97, which takes the workflow ID and then loads it in, normalizes it, updates the state, and prepares it everything so we can render this out.
Yep. And the thing is, you have to be careful here because we call initialize effect in the constructor. So, and then initialize effect have this one right here. It will have this one right here. You have to make sure that you mock or you spy on this method before constructor.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is interesting. So this is basically an orchestration issue. We can look at the
we look at the spec.
Yeah, in the initialization part.
Yep. And one thing to mention too is the workflow detail store is the search of truth for the condition store and the group store. So we're going to test the group nodes and the condition nodes as well.
Right, and this one gets injected in the workflow group store and in the workflow detail store.
Yep. So this is our search of truth. So we're going to test all the data from this one.
Very cool. Yeah, and then the other ones can be simpler by just doing basically the same, making the same assumption. We know that this store does the right thing, so we don't have to figure that out.
Yep. So this store is just very simple. I'm just going to assert right here. Just going to assert that the method or the updater on the detail store has been called or have not been called. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, for the detail store, we're gonna start up again by the spectator with the VM, and at this with this one, I have my service up here, and I have my route up here, and I have some like constant to mark, and I call it fixtures, not spec. If you look into these are just some constant of my workflow group and workflow condition. And you can see right here, I have my root group, and that has the children of first level group. That's going to have the children of second level condition. And these help me to assert when my normalized function gets called and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Same thing with the group root. I have a normalized root, so a children is a little bit different. I also have a normalized first group with a children, and then I also have a normalized first group without children. So I can test like add group to this one and stuff like that. So I have all of my fixtures in here to test.
Very cool. Yeah, I love how this is done.
All right. The first thing is I'm going to spy all of my static methods that I'm going to use. And I have a spy normalize that I spy on the workflow helper dot normalize. Delete no recursive, spy on that. Denormalize, I'm going to spy on that. And this is how we're going to spy the random ID. The random ID is that. So what I was struggling how to spy on an exported function.
Yeah.
But then it dawned on me. It dawned on me that we exported with just a module from in NX workspace. We export it as a module, so it can do this to grab the whole module and then spy on that module.
I wouldn't have figured this one out. This is a lovely little nugget.
So yes, you can do this right here.
Very cool. Yeah.
So this is how I spied random ID. So as I showed before with the workflow list store, or with workflow list component, if we want to spy on that random ID, we would have to do this in that component.
Yeah, right.
Right. Next one, we're going to have our factory is create service. Same thing. We're going to create the service for workflow detail store. We're going to use the providers here. The reason why I use providers here is for the workflow service. You see that like for the last two stores, I only test the workflow service as the mocks, so I don't care about any of those methods. But for this one, I care about the item method to return me something. The reason is if we look into our store, is in the initialize effect, we want to be able to test when the item returns, we need to update the VM. So if we don't mock the item with some return value, this will never get called, and we will not be able to test these. Right. So that's the reason why I have to mock just the item for the workflow service.
Very cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So I just mock here with some API response, right? Some status success, and this is my data that has the ID, the name, and the group will be my root group. So now the fixtures come into play where I have my root group.
Yep.
Next one, I mark the activated route again for the params to return me something. This is the workflow ID from the URL. So that's the mock provider.
And with this, our the initialize effect that we have inside the constructor is happy with how we do this.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I think the solution is pretty elegant, if you ask me.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. So next one is I have a mock random ID helper method inside of this spec, and this one it just mock the ID with some arbitrary number, and then I will mock the return value of this spy random ID, and then I return that mocked ID, so that I for sure whenever random ID gets called, it will return the 99, so I can test it.
Yeah.
SAML get VM.
Yeah, this is where you said you could. Yeah, no, this is the get VM from the workflow detail store. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
And of course, yes, we can like abstract this out so we don't have to keep doing this.
Yeah.
But then we can pass in different default value for the VM.
Yeah.
Right. So that's my get VM, and this is where I called inside my before each. Is I grab the service from create service, grab the VM. I should call it workflow service, but then I grab the inject workflow service to this one. Actually, let's just rename this one to rename code.
Yeah.
To mock service.
Yeah, so mock service.
All right, so mock service will be the workflow service, and then we have the wrap as well. Excuse me. All right, initialize. I say, hey, initialize, it should create SAML. I want to make sure that my service in my store has been created, and my VM is truthy.
Mm-hmm.
The next one, this is, I would say, hey, should call service.item with the workflow ID on initialize effect. I would just say this is route workflow ID on initialize effect. And here I don't use the observer spy, but I just straight subscribe to these params and grab the workflow ID, because here I just need to make sure that the mocked service.item, which is this guy right here, gets called with the workflow ID from the route.
Yeah.
So this is what I expect. I expect the item to have been called with 1. I should make that 1 like a variable, but yeah.
Yeah, like a const, basically.
Actually, we can do this, and there we go. I don't know why I didn't do that.
Let's run it, make sure that it still works, but it should definitely.
It should work.
Yeah. Okay. So cool. So A bit more orchestration here already. We have the router in place.
Yeah, we have the router in place. Yep.
And we're interested that the service actually gives us back a real value instead of that it just got triggered. So it's getting a bit more in depth here.
Yep. Oh, before I move on, I want to point out really quickly that in my workflow detail store, I use immer component store, and I work with a JavaScript map. And immer component store uses immer under the hood, and you have to enable map set, and I have to enable map set inside the test setup as well. So
yep, that's a great thing.
Just want to quickly point that out.
Yeah, and we also need to run it in the app. Where do you put it in the application?
I put it in the details module.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And then we already discussed this briefly. And in a real life app, you probably do this in like main.ts or in your like your core module or shared module, whatever you have. Yeah. Cool.
So for the test for the detail store test to work, I have to put it in the test setup.
Yeah.
Now I start testing. This is still in initialize, by the way. And then now I test if my VM emits default value, and it's the same thing with the get VM right here.
Yeah. So this is basically our test, our setup here for the service.
Did you see something different than the last store we test? Remember, this is the default value.
Well, so one of the different things I think conceptually there's one big difference. Here the constructor has an effect, so we need to trigger runoff effects that happen after it gets instantiated.
Right.
Whereas the other one has like it's more or less initial state.
Right. So if we look back into the list store, when we test the should VM emit default value, we test straight default value.
Yeah.
Just get VM. But for this one, we actually test default value with different values or different data, because at this point our effect already ran, and because we marked the item with these.
Yeah.
So that will actually like put that data inside my VM, and this is what I test my VM. And you can see that now the root group, all of my features comes into play very nicely with these. Right?
Yeah,
so
love it.
This is what. So that's at this point my effect ran. So I test my default values after effect ran. So let's just be explicit about that after effect ran. And we can test this, and it should run.
Awesome. So yeah, that's basically the main difference in this one, that we have like stuff triggering on
constructor
on the constructor.
Yep. Next one is I say, hey, should call workflow helper.normalize when service.item returns a workflow, because we know we marked the service item to returns a workflow. So we're gonna make sure that the normalize gets called with that. And here again, I use that root group. So I use this multiple place, and my normalize will receive that root group to actually normalize into groups and into conditions.
Yeah,
again,
very cool.
This is called. And to show this in the code, it actually gets called right here with that group from the data.
Right. So it's only on successful load, or basically on non-loading, non-error status. It loads this in and it executes this. Yeah. And then again, the other things we have here is like patch state, but we don't really care about this because that's inner workings. We really, again, just make sure that it wherever it touches the outside world, be it the service or the normalized helper or the VM, this is where we want to spy on it and make sure it behaves as expected.
Yep.
Very cool.
Right. So that's my initialize. So at this point, I should test anything or everything that happened when my store has been created.
Yeah.
Right. Next one is I test should add group to group nodes. Right. I want to test the add group. first thing first, I'm going to grab my marked new group ID. So this will return me the 99.
Yeah.
Then I will call the add group normalize.id. This is where I subscribe to the group nodes, and because I use take one, so think about it this way: when I call add group, I set the group nodes, like I mutate the group nodes on the state. So I don't touch anything on the VM here. So I just change the group nodes. And the VM doesn't capture the change of the group nodes. It just know that group node changed, then my VM will emit, but it doesn't capture change. So that's why I have to test the actual group nodes stream here.
Yeah, we don't expose the group nodes directly.
Yep. So here I say when I add the group, I want to get the value of that like new group ID. So basically here, this one here will return me the group node that just has been added.
Yeah.
It should return me that. So now I will expect that that recently added group will have the ID of the marked ID, the type of group, because I'm add group, my children should be empty, and the parent ID is the parent ID that I add the group to. So this is what I expect when I add the group.
Yeah.
And it should run.
Cool. Yeah. This is starting to get like more complicated already. I like how you build it up.
Add condition, same thing. Mark the condition ID, add the condition to the normalized root group, and grab the latest item from the marked from the condition nodes with the marked new condition ID, and then assert it. That is going to have the type of condition, the value default to false. The parent ID will be the ID that I add this condition to, and its ID will be the marked new condition ID.
Yeah.
And it should pass. There we go.
Yeah, awesome.
This one is, I say, hey, you should remove group and all of its children. So I have two things here because the children of a group can be other groups or it can be other condition. So I have two observer spy here that I subscribe to both condition nodes and group nodes. And the first thing before I do anything, I want to assert the current size of my group nodes will be 2, and my last value of the I'm going to delete this ID. I know in my test I'm going to delete this ID. So I want to assert before before I deleted it, I will have that value. I will still have that value in my observable.
Yeah.
And then I will assert the size of the condition will be 1. Let's quickly show why it is 2 and why it is 1. Is if we look into my fixtures, this root group is being used for the normalize. So the root group is one group, the first level group is the second group, and the second level condition is one condition. So that's why I have 2 groups and 1 condition.
Yep. So we have a parent. The top level group is always the parent, and then we have like one child with one condition.
One condition. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Then I call the remove group, and I pass in that normalized first group ID, right? And I will assert that my delete no recursive to have been called. This is my workflow helper. And then I'm going to assert now after I delete stuff, my size on the group nodes should be back to 1 because I delete the first group. I'm not deleting the root group. It should be back to 1, and my ID here that I'm deleted should not be there anymore.
Yeah.
So not to be truthy. And also I want to assert that the condition nodes, which is the children of the normalized first group, to have the size of 0. So this is my should remove group and all of its children, which should work.
Very cool. And I think the condition, same idea, right?
Yeah, remove condition is simpler because remove condition just have to do with the condition node. It doesn't have anything to do with the group node.
Yeah.
So it's simpler. So just assert before and after removing.
Yeah.
Update is very, very straightforward. The condition, we're gonna assert on the condition nodes right here. And we assert before we update, and we're gonna update with the value to true. And then we assert after the update that it will contain the value of true.
Yeah.
Here it just should call denormalize and service.update on save workflow effect. So I call the workflow effect. I combine latest the group nodes and the condition nodes. And I do this so I make sure that my denormalize will get called with the latest value of group nodes and the latest value of condition nodes. So this is what I'm using right here. And outside, I just say, hey, update has been called. That's it.
Awesome, man. This looks. I mean, it's. I think it's pretty complex in what it does, but it still looks pretty straightforward. And yeah, I like it. So I think there's two more stores that we have in this subsystem, which is the workflow group and workflow condition. And one thing I'm curious about, this helper method that does the normalize. Did you add tests for this separately?
Yes. So if we look into the workflow helper, and that's should be a workflow helper spec.
If you can run over this, I'm going to quickly go to the bathroom, but I'd love for you to touch on what this thing does. And then afterwards, I'll take over the coding.
Awesome.
Mr. Chow.
Hey.
Hey. Cool. Awesome. Okay, everybody is taking a small break. James also says time for a little bit of coffee, which is definitely something great.
Yep.
I love this about the live streams, that we can do these kind of things and that it's not something, it's like
Yeah.
that primetime Joe Rogan stuff here.
All right. So for the workflow helper, I have a separate test for the workflow helper. And I'm not using the root group or things I have in the fixtures for the workflows specific stores, because it is a little bit more complex than the root group and stuff like that. Here I have more nested children, and on my root I have 2 different children type. So this one is a group and this one is a condition on the root. So this is to help me with more complex tests.
Yeah.
So that's my tree. And I also have the group node. So I know from this tree, based on the current implementation of my normalize, I know I'm going to get these group nodes out of those. So I set up my group nodes here. That's going to be, from this one, I have 1 group, 2 group, and 3 groups, and 2 conditions. So my group nodes will have 3 items, and my condition nodes will have 2 items. Right. And these are my mock data.
Yeah. So this is basically the normalized structure based on the tree. Example tree above.
Yep. The second thing is, okay, now we're going to jump right into the test. And the workflow helper is just some method, some like JavaScript method test. So we don't use anything from Spectator, just straight JavaScript test.
Yeah.
First thing I want to test the each group. This is very simple. I don't think I should even have this in here, but I want to test it either way. So just say, hey, if it pass in an object with the type of workflow type.group, then it should return true. Otherwise, return false.
Yeah.
Very straightforward. This one is normalized. I nest this inside of a describe because I thought I might have more test cases for this one. But if you have a single test case, then don't nest it.
Okay.
This one is hey, should normalize the workflow group into group nodes and condition nodes. So here, I call the normalize, I pass in my tree, I get back the groups, I get back the conditions. I will expect the size to be 3, the groups 2 equals my mocked group nodes, and same thing with the condition, and they should pass. So now, because I have the mock data there, if it change anything in my normalize, like change my implementation without changing my mock, then the test should fail.
Actually, you could argue that this is probably the most important test of this whole test. Basically, make sure validation that it gets the expected output.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it should pass.
Yeah. Awesome.
Next one is denormalize. So if I pass in my current group nodes and my current condition nodes, I should get back my tree.
Yeah.
So this is the test for that, denormalize.
Yeah.
And it should
so
pass.
So basically, if you look at it, if you squint your eyes a little bit on line 65, when we look from the right on, we take a tree, we pass it to the normalize function, and this gives us groups and conditions. And then later on in the second test, we make sure that these are the same as above. And later we test these things on line 75, and we make sure that these equal the tree. So it's basically your conversion and your deconversion tested both. Yep, very cool.
Next one is the delete group recursive. So here to say, hey, if I delete, if I call this, it should delete itself and it should delete all of the child nodes. So first thing is I cloned my group nodes and condition nodes because my delete group recursive mutate the map. So I clone this right here, and then I expect before I delete, I have the size of 3 and the size of 2 for conditions. And then I will delete the group with the ID of 2. After that, I will be left with 1 and 1. So let's look what the 2 means. So if you look at my tree, I have 3 groups here, right, and 2 conditions, and that is what I assert before I remove. And then I want to remove this group, and this group has one child is a group, and this child group has a grandchild, which is a condition. So after I remove this, I should be removing 2 groups and 1 condition, which leaves me with 1 group left and 1 condition left. So this is what this test does right here.
Very cool. Yeah, and you go from 3.2 to 1.1.
Yep.
This is awesome, man. This looks very, very well tested, and yeah, super interesting to see how this is done. I think this is a valuable resource for a lot of us. And is there anything else you'd like to share? You want to keep showing inside this demo, or do you think like we can go? And
I'm gonna like speed really quick over the group store spec and the condition store spec. It's very simple, because actually it's not very simple, but the concept is very similar to the detail store. But basically, we only test. Here is one tricky part in the group store and the condition store. Excuse me. You know that we're going to have to mark the detail store, because that is what we inject in here. So we're going to mark it, right? We're going to mark the detail store for the group store, and the group store needs something from the group nodes of the detail store, and that is exactly what we use to get our group, right, from this one right here.
Yep.
So to be able to emit or push things to the group nodes so that we can assert the VM of the group store, I made the group nodes into a group node subject, which is a replace subject. So wherever I do things right here, so let's say right here, I add the group, right? I call add group. Normally, you just say, hey, assert that the add group on the detail store has been called, but here I want to really test the VM as well. So I use the group node subject. I will next a new map with my updated group that is being added, so that now I can test the spy of my VM to have that new group as well. So it is a little bit tricky, but I think we're going to run out of time if I go into too deep into these. But if you want to test, again, people, if you want to test a stream that is being marked, use a replace subject.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So you don't use behavior subject, because behavior subject will emit right away. You want to use replace subject, so you want to emit whenever you want.
Yeah. Okay. That's definitely interesting. Yeah. That's another great little detail. So before we wrap up, I think the library from CHAU that is using the subscribe spy to, I think this also supports marble testing. Is that right?
I don't think that it should be an alternative to marble testing.
Okay, because I was on Zach the Rose stream yesterday, and we talked about marble testing. I was like, oh, we're going to have this in the stream, but I thought it would be there, but there is an alternative. So this is also kind of interesting to see.
It is an alternative. Let me show you real quick. Then RxUtil. I have tests for my RxUtil as well. Right. Cool. So let's quickly look over to my handle API response gist. Right. So this is a test. Basically, this one is the same as the 2 API response. Let me up the fonts. It's the same as the 2 API response, but instead of an operator, it is a function that you pass in an observable. The to
Right.
API response is an operator. It's the same thing. Basically, it's the same thing. But you see right here, I say, hey, to test with the marble, I have to have some loading response factory. So this is my loading response. And then I have success response. I have like error response and stuff like that. And then I have to set up my test scheduler with the marble test. And then inside the test, I say scheduler run, and I have to have my marble, and then I have to have my expected response, and then I call the function that return an observable, and assign it to an observable, and then have to call expect observable to be this marble, to be this response.
Yeah.
Seems straightforward, right? A, B, I say my marble will return me a loading first, and then it will return me the success, and then it will complete.
Yeah, definitely.
Very straightforward. But then we're going to take a look at the same test using observer spine. It's the same test with observer spine.
I like this.
Right? You can just say get. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Bump it up a small little bit because it's a bit blurry. But yeah, I love how this simplifies. Simplifies this.
Yeah, there's no marbles. There's nothing. You just say what the values that I'm expecting on my observable. And this is exactly the same here. I have loading response factory. So this is my first value, and this is my second value of the observer. And that's it. There's no test scheduler. There's no marble, things like that.
That's awesome.
You just say, you call your observable, type on your operator you want to test, subscribe to that observable, and test the values of that observable.
Very cool. Awesome. So, okay, no marble testing needed if you do this, but it's still like it is available. Awesome. Okay. Cool. Let's quickly say hi to Pascal Paco. He's a friend of mine. He's not a programmer, but he knows me from way back when we were like 15 or something, years ago. And Paco, it's good to see you around. Hope everything's well. And Mr. Component Store himself, Alex Krusko. Hey, Alex. Awesome to see you. Yes, we've been doing, I think this is in total maybe the 5th live stream I do about Component Store, or maybe 6. I did one in Spanish. And tomorrow is going to be another one. Tomorrow I'm going to be with Zach DeRose and introducing him to Component Store, because he said like, yeah, I like it. I like the idea, but I don't really see a use case for it because I do everything with the global store. And I'm kind of getting to the opposite, where I'm basically getting rid of Component Store, getting rid of the global store because I have Component Store. So I think both is an example of if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? If you have like a good tool and you want to apply it for everything. So cool. I think we can switch gears and we can move back to my computer if this was it for you. Yep. And now, Alex also confirms I see benefits of both. I think, it's not that I don't see the benefits. What I do realize is that Component Store is a very easy mental map for me to make, and I really like the fact that it sits close to the component where I use it. And with Global Store, I think the main concern there's quite a bit of orchestration and things you have to put into place before making it work. So, but definitely can live in tandem. And this might actually be a nice thing to add to the Component Store demo. So if everybody has a idea of what we can do, how this can work in tandem, like a nice use case, we're going to add another demo here on the Component Store and we're going to implement it. And this is also an invitation for anybody. If you have ideas of things you want us to cover about Component Store, shout it out, scream on Discord or Twitter or wherever you can find us. And we're more than happy to figure it out and to do this kind of stuff, because we like sharing. And Alex says, thanks for doing these live streams for both of you. Well, it's our pleasure. We're both
thanks to you for making this thing.
Yep, I'm second that. Thanks a lot for making it and getting it out there. And it really scratched an itch I didn't know I had. It's a tool I've been needing for years, but I never really knew I needed it.
It's like the service I never knew I needed. Like that's the headline of a talk, component
But
store.
actually, it actually is that way. So yeah, cool. Let me reposition a little bit, and I'm gonna go ahead and go on the mission of getting this to-dos component. Now, don't get me wrong, Chow did a almost complete test. So this is actually something I'm gonna add tests for that's already being tested. And yeah, we're gonna run over it anyway. So a few things here. I'm on the main branch, and the branch that Chow has is not yet merged. The only thing I did here was run yarn at ng-need/spectator to install spectator. And
yes, we're gonna need the observer spy as well if you want to add that.
yeah, so let's do that as well. And let's say that's at high-res IO / observable spy.
No, observer.
Observer
Observer.
-spy.
Yep.
So cool. And Alex says, I'm waiting for Doc's contributions. And he specifically targets you. That's interesting. And so one of the
because
things
I told him to use the workflow example as the docs, the contribution for the docs, but I've been lazy. I've been doing all this NX and all the testing for the component store playground stuff. I forgot about the docs.
I wouldn't call that lazy, man. You did an awesome job. This was super great. And so James says some sort of dashboard with widget charge where each item could use a component store would be neat. That's definitely a nice thing.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good use case. I've been thinking of doing that, but before we want to jump into like dashboard and stuff like that, I know there's a drag and drop libraries and stuff like that manage its own state. So we have to take that into consideration as well.
Yeah.
But before that, I want to get in a use case where we have like you think of like Microsoft Paint, but like simpler, like drag and drop, but like painting and stuff like that with component store. I've been wanting to do that.
Very cool. Yeah, I think this is another thing, and we ran into this yesterday. So we've been thinking about adding a wizard, which is nice, and then I started implementing the wizard using Formally and CDK Stepper, which actually already manages all the states. So Chow and I looked at it, and we were like, yeah, if we're gonna tack on component store in this solution, it's going to be just using it for the sake of using it, but it's not going to add any benefit that we don't have already. So we have like a good flow control, and we have like error handling, and it just works pretty damn well. So it's nice. So we're going to have another forms demo, but it's not going to be component store. So I like the dashboards. And James also says, I know a project that's using global store to handle n number of widgets, and it's meh. So yeah. I'd be interested in that one using instance of component store, and actually Alex turns out, so I'm just repeating the chat here for those of you that don't read, it's use case number 2 in the complex component store state. So yeah, definitely a nice use case. I think we can be sure to add some widgets here. I got some nice ideas around that. What I really like, the idea of being able to reposition it. So I can imagine we have like one overarching store that handles the widgets, and then each of the widgets can have its own little life cycle with a component and some stuff that it does.
That's what I'm thinking as well.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, great tip, James. Thanks a lot, and Alex also for the input. I really appreciate it. So without further ado, we can go ahead and do this right here. So one of the things, I think if I run tests right now, it will not run, it will fail, because it's, well, there's this thing in tsconfig. Let's fix that one first. Just replace all the tsconfig with capitalization for the tsconfig without caps. So I think that's this one and all the jest configs, right?
You don't have to do that. It's just a warning. What is failing is because your to-dos component has all the stuff that you have to import, but we're going to switch out to use the shallow testing from ng.
Yeah, so this is the first real error. It's that it cannot find this one, so it's no error schema. Oh, just get rid of this anyway and do it the ng way. So let's go ahead and do that. So I think we can fairly say just get rid of all the items here, even this one, and so let's start with this, and just for security purposes and to be sure that this should render true. And so if I understand it correctly, what we want to do here is have the set up spectator for the component, set up spy.
For the store, if you have the store injected in this component.
Yeah.
Or any service, actually.
Let's look. I thought the idea was to go to the component first. So in this component, and I'm going to switch out, give us some more room here. In the component, what we're going to do is make sure that our component gets set up correctly so that we get a hold of this VM that actually points into our to-do store VM. Yep. We want to make sure that load to-dos effect is triggered, and then I'm just going to test one of these methods because they're all pretty similar. So I'm just going to add one, and then the rest of it's going to be done later. Then for our store, what we want to do here, so yeah, this is also something I started adding fields and form group into a store. This is something we basically, this is what we ended up with.
So hey B-Man, in my pull request for the testing, I think I talked to you about this on chat. I moved the form and the fields and the query out of the store, and I put it in the component itself.
Okay, yeah, that might make more sense, and because this is something that basically got this way, and I'm still experimenting pretty much.
Yeah,
so.
Because you can see that with this implementation right now, you cannot test the update filter effect.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So this is definitely something to take into account, and while this works and it gives for some nice and clean component where you can say, okay, you know what? Look at our HTML here, and we see how we handle the form. This is how we do the whole form, line 10 here, and this is, I think, like it's a super clean API, but if it breaks our testability in the store, then it's not a good thing to have. So I'm definitely reconsidering what we're doing here. So let's go with this one, and so this is a spy. Then I need to have some before each probably to set it up.
Yep.
And then here I want to do initialization of the store, initialization, and then well, basically invoke methods. And we should have here, let's quickly look in this add to do method. Add to do method should have add to do should trigger this to do store load effect. And in the initialization, we want to make sure that VM $sign is assigned to the store, and that the load to do's effect is called on the store as well. So I think if I paid well attention, this is basically what we do inside here, right?
Right. Basically
okay.
That.
So I'm going to go ahead and say, so what I think what's happening, but please correct me if I'm wrong, a spectator is, and this is...
It's going to be a type instead of an assign. Actually, no, it's a let, but instead of the assign, it's a new spectator.
Component?
Just spectator.
Okay.
Yep. It will not suggest you to import from jest. I don't know why, but you're going to have to change it to jest manually, just for the spectator.
Okay. Yep. And then of type to use component.
Yep.
And that's it for now.
That's it for that. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a spectator. And then we're going to have a spy.
I call it mock store or store. It's up to you.
Yep. And this is going to be of to-do store.
No, it's going to be a spied object of to-do store, and spy object is from ng spectator as well. Spy with the Y.
Spy object from
And
ng spectator just.
Yep.
And this is then to-do store.
Yep.
Like this. Okay, awesome. So then before each,
I think we missed a step. We need the create component factory.
Okay, and this is also here in the setup, right?
Yep.
So that would be const create component.
Yep.
Equals, this is the create component factory. And this create component factory comes from ng spectator jest, and we can either pass it in this component right away, but let's set it up in a bit more elaborated way, where we can say the component that we want to do is this to-do component.
Right.
Now, if I recall correctly, we can use the mock provider here.
Just the mocks.
Just the mocks, okay. And what we do here is add in the mock store, right?
This is going to be the service, because the store is going to need the service. So we're going to mock just the service. So what is to-do service?
To service, and we're just going to pass in the object here.
That's it. Yep.
Okay, cool. And then, if I recall correctly, so this method gives us a new component, and what we then can do for each of the tests is basically say spectator is create components and run that one.
Yep.
And alternatively, mock store. How do we assign mock store? What do we assign that one to?
We do equals spectator dot inject.
Yeah. Okay. Spectator dot inject. So we call the injector method that gets on the instantiated container. We pass in the
to-do store.
To-do store.
Yep. And the second parameter will be true to get it from the component injector. And we haven't set up the to-do store for the create component factory. So let's do that with the component providers. So there will be a providers array, and there will be a component providers array, and the component providers array will be the one that we use to mark the providers that we provide on the component level.
Right. And what do we enter here?
And here we're going to use, so here you can pass in, so there's also component marks, and component marks is exactly the same as marks. It's going to automatically mark all of the methods. But because of, again, the component store, we have these effects and updaters, we're going to use the component providers, and we're going to use a helper method called mock provider.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to say mock provider, and this comes from jest again, and we take here the thing that we're going to mock, so that's the do store.
Yep.
And we're going to pass in the property. So this is basically all the class methods. Well, basically class implementation of whatever we're going to mock. In pool. And so one of the ones I know is that we have VM, and we have load to-dos effect and add to-dos effect. So I think that's, for now, that should be the ones.
Yep.
Let me move those ones over. So these two are going to be just.fn.
Yep.
To implement just an empty function, and then for the VM, what we're actually going to say is VM $. If only I could type VM $, and we're going to use the off operator from RxJS. It's going to be a structure, and I'm going to quickly.
I think that's it. I don't think you have to like have the same structure of your VM, but let's keep it that. We're going to experiment right here. Let's just keep it that.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Keep it up, format it, and this is however we're going to do it. And meanwhile, Alex says, interesting. So it can do override provider here directly to provide component scoped store. I think that's exactly what it's doing, right? Yep. So, and another thing Alex said, VM $ would be replace subject 1.
Yep. So so Alex, for this, we're testing the component. we don't really care about the data or the life cycle of the VM itself. We only care about, we want to be able to just assign the VM on the store to the VM on the component to be the same instance. And that's what we're going to assert at the component level. And for the VM, the data in the VM, we're going to test that in the store.
Yeah. So that's going to be second.
I guess with the off is fine. I don't know. It's just, it could be a replay subject too.
Yeah, we can change it in a little bit. Let's see if this one works. So then when we run this initialization, I think we don't need to do any of the assignment, or we don't do any of the actions. But I think your initialization step, you divided into two other its. How did you orchestrate it? Or you have initialization?
I put initialize as a describe, so as a block or as a suite, and then the case will be hey should create, and then or should call methods will be two different cases.
Okay, so I'm gonna get initialization here, and then we're gonna move this one in here, and we say we're gonna have 2 for each one. So 1 is the store equals the store. So what I think we can do, so what I'm thinking about is that we want to check at this component, which is called spectator, if this .component.vm$ is the same as mockstore.vm$. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, so we're going to say spectator.component.vm$ to be, and this is the same and the same instance, mockstore.vm$. So this is the first test, actual test, and let's run it quickly here to see if this works. And if it is green, then this is the suspense. It's taken a long time, not sure why. And it's going to the implementation. Okay, so we need to enable shallow.
Yep, we need the shallow. So go back to the create component factory, and we set shallow to true.
I'm actually going to put it up right up here because it doesn't dangle. Shallow to true, and I also see the schemas directive, so it would also accept this no schema thing. So again, run initialization, and this should actually be now. It should have the correct $, and there's probably better words to describe what we're doing here, but for now this will do. And okay, this is interesting. It runs perfect. It's interesting that it takes a while, whereas if you look at this time, this doesn't take not even a second. So I'm not sure why this happens, but let's just make sure I'm not testing each block separately. But this is the VM has an instance of the store, and now it should have called the load to doers effect on the store. And for this one, what I think we need to do is act as the spy.
We don't need to add a spy because we're already spying it with the mock provider.
Okay, so what we then can do probably is say expect mock store dot load to do's effect to have been called.
And of course, we can do to have been called once if we want to. I think that's on the Jasmine. Just you have to do times and passing 1.
Times 1. Okay, I'm going to quickly run this one more time just to make sure that these both works. But yeah, straightforward enough. I think this is super nice as a start. And so the second one is actually going to be a variant of this one. We're going to, it's basically a combination. We're going to grab this one and make sure it runs.
So we have failed one.
I think it's because we don't actually invoke this load to do's effect.
It gets called twice.
It gets called twice. Okay. This is interesting. So great that we did check this one. and it's before each, but before each is before each block, right? Or before
it should be before each block.
Yeah, before each describe. Or before each it.
Oh, I get. Yeah, it is get caught twice because we have two it.
So let me quickly make this one it, just to see how that tests.
I think it should pass now.
Yeah, I hope it does. Otherwise, we're going to have to call in an expert to see how it actually works. So running in this one, and now it runs. Okay, so yeah, we can fairly say it's the before each is doing the each block. So
yeah, what I would do is I have an after each, and let's have an after each.
Yep.
And in here we're gonna call mock store.lows to do effect.
Mock store dot
lows to do effect dot mock reset. I think there's a mock reset.
Mock reset.
Yep, that's what I would do.
Very cool. And now it should work again. And
I think you just test that first one.
You're totally right. Let me quickly run this one and get rid of the one right here. Terminate that one. And I'm actually also going to check real quick if I'm not running the dev server, but I think I'm not. So that's not adding up to the speed. I'm still not sure why it's doing this. But hey, here we go. Okay, cool, awesome. So this one is being tested, that this one happens as expected. Now, what do we want to run here? So this actually is going to be a describe block. Invoke methods, or I'm open for suggestions for better names. And then we should have it should trigger the add to do effect in invoking the method. So I think the assert, the exception, we can already take it from here. We can just say we want this to have been called add load effect one time. So then the action is spectator a component dot add to do and pass in a to do. And quickly look at the shape here. It's a task, so I think we have a text. And we have well, let's quickly check how this is implemented. So in the component, our add to do, it's an HTML input element. So, okay, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say this to do, we have a value of test. It's of type HTML input element.
I think you have to do as
HTML input element, and this makes sure that this gets the affected state. So I'm running the whole group here, the whole invoke methods, and this.
And here we can actually test that add to the effect has been called with the test string.
Okay, cool. And you would do that as a similar another expect, basically group them.
Let me double check if it has like to have been called with or times with. So there's to have been called and to have been and called with. Yeah, so we can group those two assertions.
Yeah, so this is exactly, it should trigger the to-do at, we even close with when invoking the method. Yeah, I think this is definitely a nice way to go about. And then, well, basically the other ones are gonna be very similar. So I'm just not gonna do that.
Extremely similar.
Because this is gonna be very similar. Okay, and then
go back to the components spec real quick. So instead of to have been called times, can you use to have nth been called? To have there's an nth there's a letter Yep.
Yeah.
To have been and call with the second one. And we can pass in 1 for that, and we can pass in test for the second one.
Love
so
it.
now we can do that.
Yeah, and now we can do it that way. And that's awesome. That's really awesome. So, okay, that's pretty cool. And then with regards to the store itself, we can already take a peek at what we're going to do here. So do we need to get rid of the fields in order for test this, or can we just leave out the test that we do here with the update function?
Yeah, we can leave out a test.
Okay, good. Let's do that.
Yep.
So now to-do.store.ts, this is a total, doesn't have any tests. So what we're going to do is to-do.store.spec.ts. And we're going to create a new one, describe to-do's store. And inside here, I think we're going to do the setup here. And for each is going to run right here, and we might have an after each. And CHAU is already sending me along kindly a few of the documents I need, so that's nice. So what I think here as well, initialization is one of the things we want to test.
Yep.
Initialization. And then the other thing we want to test is basically if methods we invoke trigger the behavior in the tree.
Yep. And we want to assert the VM emit the right value after some action.
Because this is calling actions. Okay, so setup here, what we're going to do is set let spectator. Spectator of type spectator service.
Correct.
And this comes
and
from.
Again, you're going to have to change that to
initial. Yeah. And what we're going to do here is add to-do store. To-do's store. Now, what we want to mock here is say mock service is spectator service.
Actually,
is that right?
No, we're going to use the spy object for this one.
Okay. Yep. So that is spy object best, and this is to-do's service. Okay, then before each we say
to-do service, not to-do store.
Sorry, you're right. Totally right.
And we're going to need the VM as well.
Yeah, so we're gonna say this is the const get VM, the one that you sent me along, and I'm not gonna type it all out, but we take here, I think to write it down, we take partial, which is a partial of some state. We return some defaults, and then
some default state, and we were going to merge the partial.
Default state, I'm going to merge in the partial right here. So I think you send it over Discord. Let me quickly get this one right here. Add that one back here, and make sure that I'm getting the right ones here. Yeah, okay. So let's see. So the partial object that we're going to get in, and this is basically a very similar shape as the store itself. So I'm going to copy over this whole part. And we need to import this to do here. And then what it returns here, and I'm still copy pasting, so bear with me for a second. What it returns here is we say, okay, we return all these defaults and add on any partial. So this gives us a get VM method that we can call, we can add it some data, and that returns our store. So great helper method right here. Let me move back to where we were. Now, then I also think we need to have the create service method, right? Or the create
create service factory.
Create service equals create service factory. And we're going to pass in which factory, which is to do store. And we're going to pass in objects here.
You're going to pass in an object just like the create component factory.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the whole thing. Get rid of that to-do store.
Oh, you're right. Yep.
Inside that, they have a service instead of component. Yep. And that's will be your to-do store.
Okay, cool.
And for the mocks, for the to-do service, we're gonna pass that in the mocks array.
Yeah, so it will automatically mock the to-do service and all of its methods.
Correct.
That will work as expected, and we don't need to do any mimicking of overriding any just functions here.
Right.
Well, then before each test, what we're going to do is spectator is create service.
Yep.
And the other one, let me move this get VM out of the. No, it's fine. We have it inside. Mock service equals. Help me out here. I should check out.
There's an inject method on the spectator.
Mock service is spectator dot service dot inject.
No, just dot inject on the spectator.
You're right. Directly on the spectator. Here we say, give us the mock service.
That should give you the to-do service.
To-do service. Yep.
And
set it to true. Or don't we need?
We don't need that because to-do service is a singleton.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, mock service, and then after each, we don't really need it. So now, what are we interested in during the initialization? So let's take a quick look at this to-do store. So inside initialization, we use the super to set the initial state. So we expect that this is at least some part of the state once we're done initializing. Mm-hmm. And that we've been called this update filter, but I think this is something we're going to kindly ignore for now, right?
Yeah, because again, so this one right here is the update filter. Is kind of hard to test with the query inside the to-do store because I'm going to explain it a little bit here. So the update filter is the method on the to-do store, and we're testing the to-do store itself. We're not marking the to-do store, so we cannot say to-do store.update filter to have been called. We actually have to test the implementation of update filter. And the update filter is an updater, so it's going to update the state somehow. And in this one, it's going to update the filter on the state. And we need to be able to pass in some data. But here we call it in the constructor, and we pass in an observable, which is the query. There is no way for us to mark this query inside of the to-do store.
Yeah. So while it seems nice and magic to have this all tied together from a testing point of view, it's not magic. It's kind of annoying.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So right here in the constructor, I want to be able to test. Let's say I want to be able to test update filter gets called in the constructor, and I want to be able to let's have a test. Say this.query.next foo, and I want to be able to test my state update with the foo for the filter.
Right.
But we cannot do that here.
Okay, yeah, it makes total sense. So let's ignore it for this. So the only thing we're interested after initialization is that this is the state we have, right? And and see, so we don't need to add any set up anything. We can just, I think, directly go into expect. And what we want to do is spectator.service.vm $. Now you got to help me because now I'm.
So we want to use observer spy now. This is where we're going to use observer spy.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is we're going to say const observer spy
inside this method, right?
Yep.
Yep.
And it's going to be subscribe spy to.
Subscribe spy to.
With the lowercase s.
Subscribe spy to. Okay, awesome.
And we're going to pass in the spectator service.vm for that one.
Right. Okay. Yeah. We don't expect it straight away, the observable itself, but we're going to use this one first.
Yep. So now let's just show the audience that we can like run debug. So just just have a console log somewhere after line 43, and then put a breakpoint on line 44.
Keyboard shortcut for the breakpoints, or not that you're aware of?
I don't know. Put a breakpoint on line 44 actually. Yep.
Yeah.
And run debug it.
Run it with debugging, and now it's gonna load it in. It's gonna quickly start the debugger. It's always a little bit slower, right? Having the debugger on.
Yeah, it's a tad slower.
Yeah.
Eventually, it will get there, and you'll be able to evaluate expression. Let's see what it says.
Cannot read service of undefined.
Defined. You know what? Put that in an it block.
That would really help. That would really help. People on the audience were already like screaming at YouTube.
Like, what is these guys doing talking about testing?
Yeah. Yep. No, I'm gonna be honest that I don't do as much testing as I should, but hey, I'm here to learn as well, and this is a great opportunity. So yeah, thanks a lot for sharing your knowledge with all of us, Chau. This is definitely much needed. So
yeah, I feel the same way.
But I mean, you come over as a person that's very disciplined in doing his tests, and or is that just an image you have?
I mean, I try to.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, cool. So now we run it, and it stopped at the breakpoint line 45, and then we can actually see what is inside the observer spy.
Yep.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. So yeah, anything you want to point out here specifically, or?
So what we want to do, the observer spy gives us. Can you expand that prototype? Proto. There's another proto.
Yep.
Right there. So what we interested in is those get values method. Get first value, get last value. Most of the time, we're going to use get last value because we want to get the latest value of that observable after some action has been done or has been acted. Yeah. So what you can do is do Command Shift A and run the evaluate expression.
Run the evaluate expression.
Yep, and now you can call observer spy.get get last value.
At last value, and this.
And hit Command Enter. And it will give you that value of the observable that you want to test. Now we want to use this to expect observer spy.get last value to equal, and that is the state you want to equal to.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I really like this. I'm aiming to use this a lot more because this is super powerful. Okay, cool. Let's move this one down quickly. So what we're going to say here, and this is what I said, this evaluate expressions helper can really tell you what is the expression you need to put in your expect block. This is like there might be more things you can add it to your watchers. So this is also nice, but yeah, let's go here and put in.
And we want to call it to equal, and we want to use the deep compare or the deep comparison here. So now we want to equal an object that's going to be like the default value that we want to test for.
Oh, I think I have this in my
I think this is where we call get VM.
Yeah, this of course.
So get VM without passing anything, we return the initial state for us.
And the get last value is one singular value, right? So this is not an array.
Yes. Yeah. If you want to test an array, then you're going to call the get values.
Right. Yeah. And get value should give me the whole one. Let's do this one more time. No, in debug mode, I think, or just run it normally.
I would just run it normally. It's up to you.
Yeah. I'm not going to show this dialog again. I'm fine with it doing what it should. And
hopefully it worked. Oh, I think this should fail because my VM doesn't have the fields and the forms.
right, yeah, I think it will fail. But let's see how this goes. And I see my console log here, which is like what I always used for debugging. Let's get rid of it right now. But yeah, this is definitely, so the get VM here is a little bit different because we have like these 6, whereas when I look at the store, I also, and this, so this is also a pattern that I figured out worked. In the return method of my VM, I can just pass through class properties, but it's also kind of not really the way I think this is supposed to work. I feel like I'm hijacking on something that emits state, and I'm also going to pass along what happens to be on the class component. Not sure what your idea about this part of the.
Again, it depends. Since I started testing more, I kind of lean more towards testability. So these in here, I don't think it's testable.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that idea, and it's also something I should.
I think you can stop that. That's the one thing that I don't know what happened, but sometimes that hangs if the shape of the VM doesn't match with the observable.
Interesting. Okay, that's a good.
I'm going to reach out to CHAU actually to ask about that.
Right. So we can do a few things, like we can get rid of these 2, or we can just add them.
We can get rid. I think we should get rid of them.
Yeah, let me just get rid of them here. Yeah. And we don't really care about the app breaking at this moment or not. We're just checking how to test it. Yeah. Okay. So then quickly gonna run it again to see if this works.
Yep. It should.
Then what do we want to do here? Call actions, and let's, I think, go for the following actions. Let me quickly go in there. So if we look at the effects we have load to do's effect, we have add to do effect, and then delete, remove, filter. And then the load to do's effect, as we know, is being called from the ng-on-init.
Correct.
In the to-dos component, and this is being triggered. So this might be nice 2 ones to start out with. Let me copy over those names. So one will be to-dos effect, and the other will be add to do effect. And we can also see in the bottom of the screen that the test by now has been run, so that's good. So what do we want to do here? What I think we want to do here is call a method, which is act. Call the method, and what is it? Assert. VM now has to-dos. That's one. And the other thing I think we want to do is call the method with text as a parameter and assert that new item exists in the VM. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Now,
bless you.
Thanks, man. And I'm going to quickly reposition a few things here so I can see. Okay, you have the get mocked service items return, and this is something we need right now, right?
Yep. We're going to need that.
Yeah, so this is the a helper method that basically mimics sending out an observable of various responses. So we have the first response where it's loading state, and the second response is where it actually has it to do, and it successfully did this.
So here, this is what I put this inside of my describe block of the calling action. So if you want to put it there instead of put it in the global.
Yeah. So this is right here. And this is the mocked response we have, and this is what we can pass into get VM, right?
That is what we're going to use. So you know that we had the mocks, the to-do service in the mocks array. We're going to arrange the mocked return value with that.
Okay, let's go ahead. So what are we going to do here?
So we want to get our observer spy. So we're going to assign the subscribe spy to the observer spy.
Spy is subscribe spy to, and what we're going to do is
VM.
spectator.service.vm.
Yep.
And this is it, and I can assume we can already do the same for that.
Right. The next one is we're going to say mock service.
Service.
Items.
Items, plural.
And dot. We're not going to go aside with dot mock return value once.
Return value once.
So that we don't have to call mock reset.
Right.
And
so
here we're going to pass in that get mocked service items return.
Yeah. And this is a method, so we need to invoke it.
Yep.
And
that's it.
We don't need to pass in anything because we don't really care about the previous value.
Yep.
So this basically says, hey, if whatever system calls dot items here, give me the returns and do it only once.
Do you want me to quickly explain why we have to mock that return value?
Please, go ahead.
All right, can you go back to the to-do store? So can you scroll to the load to-dos effect right there? So so here normally what we want to test is we just want to test if the items method on the service has been called. But because we do something after that to the store, specifically we're going to update the state of the store with the update to-dos. So without mocking the return value of the items, this line 68 will never get to from the testing standpoint. That's why we have to return like an observable that will emit something so that we can get to line 68 in our test, so that we can test the state has been updated.
So I think in terms of observables in general, if you have an observable that's either undefined or null or doesn't have a value, it doesn't emit, it doesn't complete. You need to have something to continue the pipeline, basically the flow of data. And so this is why we mock listed service items and we make sure that we return at least something when this gets called. And that something happens to be exactly the structure that we need. So I say here that we call the method with text. We can then consider that when this adds do effect, we have another one in this object here.
Yep, that's what I have for the workflows one that I pass in the data as well. But for this one, I don't test like a new to-do gets added, but you can test it if you like.
Yeah, now let's continue with the load to-dos effect. Let's do this one, and then I think that's a great wrap for this series on testing component store. Awesome, and yeah, kind words from Alex here. Alex had to go off, but you guys are fantastic. Well, thanks a lot, Alex. It means a lot coming from you. We totally think the same about you. So, okay, awesome. Let's wrap this puppy up. So
that's done for the arrange. Now we're gonna have to act.
Okay, cool. And the act here is basically gonna invoke the method manually, right? We don't no longer import. We don't longer care where it's being run, so we can just say spectator.service dot load to do's effect, which is a method. Yep. So that's it. That's the only action. Yep. And now we're going to say expect observer spy dot. Now let me quickly think what I think we need to do. What I think is we can do get latest value again. And this can equal get mocked service returns item.
I'll get VM.
I kind of understand why you created this helper method now.
Actually, that's gonna fail.
Okay, and let me quickly check why. Well, we're checking the last value of the. No, I would assume that this last value, but it's no longer get VM because we now have data in the VM.
Correct.
And this is why it's failing. So do we pass in whatever we mucked inside here? I think the last value should be this piece.
Right.
But not, it should be more than this piece. It should be get VM and have this one as data. So
you're gonna now we're gonna have to look into the to-do store to see what we have as implementation.
In the to-do store, what we say, we take the whole API response and we do this update to-dos. So let's open this update to-dos method here, and we say saving to false and to-dos to value. So we want to have saving to false in the new object. So that can be, I think this takes an array. No, it takes a partial where we can saving true, and to-dos is an array and it only has this one.
It's actually a little bit more than that, but just now can you go back to the to-do store real quick? So let's go. So when update to-dos gets called, it's going to update the state with saving and to-dos. Now because right here we're just updating the state, we're going to have to look into the VM to see what we return from the VM. So from the VM, filter to-dos, because we don't have any filter. That filter to-dos is going to be that data array.
Yeah. So the thing here, this is basically derived state, because also is loading should be set to false. It's not already, and is empty should be set to false as well. So these are also things that happen. Like we could even do something, and I'm not sure if that's a good practice for testing. Sometimes I make sure here, before calling something, I make sure like, hey, here we don't have to-dos, we don't have is empty, basically undefined, and just assume it here, and then assume that here it is set. So here we do have is empty.
So here a good approach is to set a debugger, set a breakpoint to see what you have in the observer spine.
And that would be in the expect, or where did
you can put whatever after the load to the effects. So yeah, you can put it there and then run debug on that. Did you run debug?
No, I run the normal one. Thanks for making sure I do. So very cool, very cool. This is all super nice stuff.
So for this debug, you want to call the get values instead of get last value. So, actually, I mean, like with the evaluate expression, right there we can assert the get last value. But for the evaluate expression, we want to do the get values.
So okay, this is mock
observer spine. It's going to be observer spine.
Observer spy dot get values.
Yep.
And run this one. So okay, this is super nice. So this this shows us is that first time it ran.
That's our initial value.
That's our initial value, right?
Yep, that's our initial value. And then the second time will be the loading to. So the second time is when the to API response operator kicks in. So it will return you to. And then the last one is when it's success. So it's going to return you the value.
Yeah.
So that's, if you want to test the whole array, you can test the whole array.
Yeah, so I could even test the whole object, and this copies JSON. Okay, I love this because I think with that I can just say, oh no.
Oops.
That was not it. That was not what I expected to happen. Okay.
So what I think for the stream purposes, let's expect the get values. Let's do that.
Get values.
Yep. And it's going to equal an array.
An array.
It's going to be the first item will be just get VM. That is our initial state. The second is the one with is loading set to true, and the third one is loading set to false, and the filter to do is going to be our data. So you might want to copy that real quick from the marked. Yeah, right there.
And is empty will also be set to false.
Oh, right. And that's it. I think now you can run it. It should pass.
Yeah, I really like this. And actually, when you look at it this way, I can get rid of this breakpoint here. When you look at this way, it kind of feels like something a marble diagram could also tell you, right? These are the 3 steps having. I like the idea of marble tests, and when I concentrate, I can really help. It can really help visualize me, but also it's not a guarantee. And I think it really depends on how people learn and see stuff. I often find it kind of confusing, and I need to wrap my head around thinking about marbles. I think for other people, it's a more natural fit. I think I prefer having a more code-based approach, if you will.
I like this better.
Right. And let's just make sure that this fails, because why not?
Yeah.
We're here anyway. So we're going to run this again, and then this is the derived state. So super nice. I think these are some super nice tests and tools for us to use, do these things. Let's make sure that this fails. Okay, fails. And why does it fail? Because received is not expected, and here it does a deep comparison on why. So cool. So that's totally that. Then call the method with text and assume that the new item exists in the VM. So let me see if I can, based on the test that I did before, if I can do this. What I think we can do is have the same items there, because this is basically after we loaded effects. So that's kind of a realistic thing to assume that this has been run after we create the loads effect. So this is the first one I'm going to do. And if I'm doing something wrong, please stop me. And otherwise, just let me mess, because this is how I got into coding anyway, just looking at stuff, changing it around, see if that helps. So that's going to be the arrange. So I'm going to annotate it here until I can dream the 3 words. The act is going to be call the method with text. Now it's going to be add to do effect, and this takes text as a string, so we don't need to take into account the method here that we had before, where it was an input value. And then exists in new VM, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this whole block, and going to make sure that this one has another one. And now I'm getting into the territory where I don't know which ID this is. Well, I do know. I don't know. I need to mock this. I do know the text is set to text.
Yeah,
that's the value that.
Let's mark the ID as well.
The random ID generator. So the point here is let's make this fail so we can understand what fails. So this works pretty much as expected, but in the implementation of the filter to-dos, I don't even know where it gets its ID. Is it from the database? Is it because we don't do random ID here, I think.
Let's just take a look.
We don't do random ID here. This is interesting. Okay, so to-do store spec and one test failed. That was expected. Add to-do effect, and so okay, interesting.
You haven't marked the create method on the service. We haven't marked the return items on that.
Yeah. So that's all the way up here, right? Or is it?
I don't have a helper for it. I don't have a helper for it. So I just have. Can you go to the test of that? So right next to on line 76, we can do mock service dot create.
Mock service dot create. Then mock.
To-dos. Can you go to the to-do store real quick? Go to add to-dos effect. Okay, so here's the thing, because our create method doesn't return a response, so we don't have to. We just have to return something so that it gets to. Excuse me. So that it gets to tab response. But what we want to mock, we want to mock the items.
Yeah. So okay, because here we call in load effect again, so we basically need to change whatever this returns the second time.
So now in the get mocked service items return, can you go to that method? Get mocked service item return. We're going to change the signature of this to take in the data of to-do array.
Yeah, as the first parameter.
Yeah, as the first parameter.
That's going to be data.
Yep, and we're going to copy that first. Copy that array first.
Yeah.
Yep, and we're going to pass data for data.
Yeah, so just leave it as is.
And go down to the load to-dos effect real quick.
Load to-dos effect in the store, or will we test it?
Right here. So now for that get mock service return, we want to pass in an array with the thing you just copied.
This.
Right now, yep. Now for the second one, can you go to the to-dos effect? The add to-dos effect. Yep. For this one, you want to pass in an array with the item that you're going to add to.
So this is going to be one, and then like text string. Let's make this something more new to do, whatever. Doesn't really matter. It's set to false, and then like let's create this 4, 5, 6. Is that right?
So let's just assume let's assume that the mock service items. Let's just assume that we currently have an empty to-dos, so we don't really need from line 100 to line 104.
Right. Doesn't really.
Just that.
Yeah. Okay, and then just to make sure, then this will fail because this has this data in here, and it also has the new to-do with has another ID. So I'm gonna quickly edit this one.
And we still have to mark a return value of the create to return an observable that will emit something.
Yeah, right. So that can be here inside mock service dot create dot mock return value once, and it can be generally of true, with, for example. And this will at least trigger something to happen.
Yeah, that's gonna fail because we have the create method to return a to do. So you're gonna have to pass in like some to do. Off to do is gonna be an observable off to do.
Off, and then yeah, it already says it task true, task hello. Doesn't really matter because we're not going to use it. Done really false. Like this, and that should make that one happy. Now let's make sure that this one, because this is whatever gets into the store, and just going to run it again as this.
Yep.
If this doesn't work,
I think it should pass. Let's see.
Let's move up this one. And in the meanwhile, hey, Connie is here. Connie Leung, hello. I think calling in from Hong Kong, if I recall correctly. So that's awesome to see you here. Must be a start of a new day down there. So that's awesome. Now this is interesting.
Yeah, it should not be empty.
It should not be empty, but it here the expects says is empty.
Yeah, we set the expect to true, but it actually false, so it should not be empty. Right, and there's one more thing. We're missing one VM actually,
and one item in the VM.
Yep, we're missing one get VM. So for this one, I'm thinking for this one, the VM will actually emit 4 times.
Right. We
and
quickly
that
inspect it.
we can do a debugger. I thinking it should return 4 times, and one of those times we set the saving to true.
Okay, let's get here again the observable SPY. Observable SPY. What?
Observer SPY. The breakpoint has not been hit yet, so you cannot see it.
Now
you
we can observer SPY. So we can
actually
do
evaluate expression.
evaluate expression. Command Shift
Yep.
F8.
And do
And
observer
now
SPY.
get values.
Oh,
yeah,
5 times. So let's see what's happening here.
So I think these first two are just toggling loading.
So the first one is our initial stage. The second one is toggle the saving.
Saving to true.
What is the third one?
Oh, sorry. Let me.
Command Shift A. Yeah.
Observer SPY dot get values, and
I want to see the third one.
Set saving to true. The third one set is loading to true. So it looks like it somehow toggles saving to set true. So we want to check in the component store in a little bit what is causing the saving to true to see if we can. I think I know it is, because if we do
can we check the fourth one as well?
Yeah, but I think I know what it is, because before triggering the add, we display a little saving message in the UI. So we say, first we set this thing is saving, so it already appears a new line. Then it goes out to the back end, or to the service, and it adds it. So that makes sense. And then the fourth one, so that would be number 3 here. This one now
set the saving back to false.
Set saving back to false, but it doesn't have an array. And then afterwards we trigger load effect again, and this will actually load it for us.
I think I have an idea of what's happening here. So can we go to the to-do store and go to the add to the effect here. So when we invoke the add to the effect, we're going to update the saving to true. So at this point should emit twice. The VM should emit twice. The first one is the initial state. The second one, we set the saving to true.
Yeah.
Now, and then for the create, for the tap response, and we get the to-dos effect back. So for that one, the third one, we set the loading to true, and we set the loading to true, and then we set. Let's go to the update to-dos. Update to-dos on this one. I want the line 47 and line 48 each trigger a change in the VM. Like they are not, I guess, patched together.
I'm also curious to see where loading gets set, because let me double check. We don't have loading state in here. We do say is loading, but it's a derived state, so this is not an action we can set. So this is interesting.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I can go, in the meanwhile, go check out if I can figure out why this works. And I'm going to go ahead and open this evaluate expression. If I only can find, yeah, there you go. Observer SPY.get values to just get another look at how these things look. I think the difference between 3, 4, it's like saving to do is true to false, and the other one is saving to do's. Is false is true, and then the last one that I'm interested in right here is loading is getting set. Now we have data, and that means that this triggers to false. So one more time, we're going to start out with saving false. So the first one is going to have saving to true. That's That's good. And then the second, we're gonna have saving true and loading to true. That's also good. Then saving to false, and then loading to false as well. So we're gonna say the first one is gonna be empty, and then we're gonna say is saving is true, and then is loading is true, and then saving will be false. Then finally we'll get the data where loading is false, empty is false, saving is false as well, but that's probably initial state. So yep, let's run this one. I'm not going to run it with debugger. I just went over them again and compared them a little bit. What should expect it where? So let's see how this works.
You know, it's a long stream when both the host and the guest went to the bathroom.
Totally agree. Yep, totally agree. And I love to be hosting a show where this is all possibilities. So I think I made a logical mistake, which wouldn't be the first one. Not today, not anytime. I think these two have to switch.
Really?
Not sure. From looking at the output, this was what I grasped. But so because we say saving is false where it's actually true.
Okay. Yeah. Wait, what? So saving true. Okay. Can you run that again?
Sure. It's the same.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
It's this one. Do you want to run the debugger and inspect it again?
Yeah.
So one of the things I do like about this session and is, well, we did quite a few of interesting stuff on how to use VS Code debugger. And that's super nice. That might be a stream on its own. But also, I think it's nice that we run into the same errors that everybody else would run into. So that's pretty nice, I think. So we're interested in these two and why we have loading true and saving false, and at some point we have loading false and saving true.
Yep. So is loading true is when we set the status to loading, and that is because of the to API response operator. And when that happened, we call a load to do's effect again, and load to do's effect we'll call the update to do's, and then update to do's will set the saving to false regardless.
Right. Which means, okay, let's observe on. Let's make sure that this one is a evaluate expression. What is this?
And the man himself is gone, so I cannot ask.
Yep, the man and the myth, and I just want to use the evaluate expression. Evaluate expression. There you go. So here, let's see the window. Is it hidden somewhere? No, it shouldn't. I can't see the window. I'm getting crazy. I'm just going to make sure that it didn't run somewhere. No, I don't see it anywhere. Let me pull it up one more time. And pull this one up and evaluate expression, run debugging actions. I don't see it. I don't see it at all. So this is interesting. So we have to do it without the debugger for a second. But yeah, let's take a look if we can logically reason. So what I think, and let's go back to the store. So we're gonna say add to do's. Add to do effect. So we're going to say update saving to true, and this method just sets saving to true. So there's nothing special here. And we're going to call the service create, and this does whatever it does. It triggers the response, and this calls load to do's effect. Now saving is still true. So I think we're here, right? We're now here in the
Yep.
reasoning behind it. Okay, so next step, load do's effect. Load do's effect. I don't see it set loading to true. Because loading, we don't set loading, because loading is the derived state. So if loading is if we have set status to loading and if we have data. If we don't have data, if the status is set to loading and we don't have data. So inside our load to do's effect, let me quickly think. Status is set to loading. So probably update response here, but we don't set the status. But it's inside API response, right? So okay, this is
right.
API response is the status. And the status comes from here loading. And this comes from the this to do's straight away. So loading, but data is not set.
Let me make sure that I'm not crazy here. So instead of...
Yeah, you actually got a working example of this, right?
Yeah, but I'm not testing like you do. So
okay.
Let me quickly say false. Right.
So it possibly could, if it's what it you suggest, then switching these lines should make it behave differently.
Yeah. Try that. Actually, it's not. It's still the same behavior. Huh. Interesting.
Okay, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna think that we're not gonna spend too much more because this is probably not. This is probably something we figure out right after saving the stream. Like, this was something simple.
Yep.
But sorry. Yeah, I think we can safely leave it as is. As much as I like to understand it.
Yeah. So for this to pass, I would say line 121 should be line 122.
Yeah, I just switched them around just right now, right a second before you said it. I switched it around to see if this works, which is kind of nice, I think, if it would work, which it doesn't. Now here it says, hey, I expect is loading and is saving both to be false.
Yeah, that's the thing that's throwing me off. So on line 121, it's actually saving still true, is loading true. So right. That's the VM, that's the admission. I think it should not have happened.
Right. Okay, in any case, I'm going to save up this tree and we can save up this branch and we can, if somebody volunteers to check out why it is what we don't get, feel free to come on the show. Okay, and this actually got it. So we're stopping with green. I love that. I love that. So, okay, I'm going to quickly go back to the store and remove these changes I did because, yeah, we shouldn't have to worry with these. And I think with that, we can leave it here for today. And I ultimately want to bring your attention to where you can find this awesome repo and awesome project, which is right about here. Let me pull this one up and make sure that this gets in the right screen so we share it. So here we are. GitHub.com/bman component store playground, built by CHAU myself. And yeah, this is the thing. You can watch a deployed version right here. This is, I'm going to set up auto deploy at some point, might stream it, might not. And so you can play around. Some people reached out and asked if we have a roadmap. We don't really have a roadmap. We did chat about some things we'd like to add. And most of the pieces of UI I built right now, I was like, oh, this would be great to have in the component store playground. This might be similar for you, CHAU, to have like a lot of use cases. But again, if you have a great use case, we're definitely going to do whatever James mentioned. So have like a dashboard kind of UI. How it worked until now, but that's definitely not a recipe or something. But I generally started out with making a mock of the screen, and then CHAU and I get together and see how we can implement the component store, or in case of the condition workflow builder, this was actually something that came from a work project from CHAU. So this is some various things there. If you want to contribute, hit us up on Discord. This is probably the easiest one. Just chat with us, and we're going to figure out something that you can add. And for me, I think that's all I have today. I don't know, CHAU, if you have any things you want to mention.
I don't really. But one thing, Tiger UI is released today.
Tiger UI, yes.
That looks interesting.
Yeah. What I really liked about Tiger UI, and I think it's called Polymorpheus, the library they presented. I really liked it. It seems like it's a nice abstraction on how you can make dynamic components and accept either a string or a function or a reference to a template. And maybe even more, maybe just a component. You didn't see it?
I did not. I missed the stream.
I didn't. I actually saw it on, I think on Twitter is where I saw it. Let me, I need to check out where it is. I need to make sure that I'm getting the right one. Otherwise, I'm wasting way too much time. But yeah, Taiga UI of Think of Credit Systems. I think the good folks are coming from Russia, all the way from Russia, bringing us this. And inside our Angular Discord, discord.gg/Angular, they also chatted a little bit about Polymorpheus. So this is Taiga UI. Definitely check it out. It's currently only in Russian, but I think they are working on a translation. And now Polymorpheus, okay, so I needed to search what the actual package name is. So I think this lives in a different repo. These people are not very monorepo-ish, if you ask me. So they have a lot of separate repos, which is totally fine. So Polymorpheus is a library that allows you to dynamically add content and context into a component. And it takes these things. It quickly accepts primitives, so number of strings. So this would be your default input. Functions that take a context as an argument and return a primitive, either one of these. Templates that get initiated with this context. So that's the ng template. And components that would get a context injected through DI. So I think this is just a reference to any component you have. And so it might seem like a very simple, like, yeah, okay, this is just like a small wrapper. I actually think it's kind of a nice abstraction and a nice thing to go ahead. I haven't played with it yet, but I can imagine that you can make super flexible UI components that allow you to pass in like either a name, a title, or a function that returns a title, or a template or a component, and it all renders at the same spot. So at the place wherever where you want to print out this component or text or method or function, it can do so. So yeah, personally, this is definitely something I'm eager to check out. And the reason we came to this one is, because of Taiga UI, which definitely is recommended as well. It's built by the same folks, and these are definitely, if you ask me, high quality Angular packages that come from this group of people. The other project from them is ng Web APIs, which also is super nice. And small disclaimer, I'm actually going to look at having a web worker communicate with the component store. So I can access my component store as an API and have a web worker that interacts with this store and does stuff. So yeah, that's it. And then with that, I think we can wrap it up for today.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for watching. CHAU, it was great having you here. I hope to have a lot of more of these great sessions in 2021. But first, tomorrow, Zach DeRose on this stream. It's tomorrow in the evening, 9:30 Eastern time. You can do the math on when it's at your time zone. Zach and I'm going to be there. Zach's going to prepare a demo application that's using the global store, and we're going to convert it. And if time permits, we're having some thoughts about how we can tie in Firebase authentication into a component store. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be awesome as well. And with that, we're going to wrap it up today. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.